dramatic actually. Let me give you something dramatic, which people will dislike you for when you write about it, is to get our civil servants proactive and working for the national good. All around the region you can go to government departments. There are all of our university graduates with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees and PhDs sitting around attending meeting after meeting but doing nothing whatsoever really to get our economies going and growing. There's a whole civil service mentality out there where you need anything done, call for a donor, call for a consultant, let them do the hard slog. And there's a problem about bureaucratic reform in the region, which is not going to go away, because this problem is absolutely deep-seated. One of the problems has always been, if you're a Kiribati person or a Vanuatu civil servant or Solomon Islander, even after you've graduated, you'll be earning a salary of about $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year, right? In comes a donor-funded consultant. He'll be earning $250,000 a year, and quite often he will come in and learn off you because he needs local knowledge. So you supply the local knowledge to that person. Your salary remains the same. The only perk for you is maybe a meeting that you might go to in Suva or New York, Canberra or something, where you might make enough money on the per diems, which will be a huge boost to your own saving. So two things happen. One, you don't actually try and do any work yourself. You call, they're going to be paid so high, they're not coming into it, And two, why bother with doing anything, when you can, if you can go off overseas and do. So you can go around the region, you'll find people are not there because they're attending meetings left, right and center. So it's a big problem area. Trouble, it's a very, very difficult question for you to raise because it's a criticism of our own colleagues and our own people who are occupying very, very important positions. And one thing I can say this, and I can say this with great disappointment, that 30 years ago, 25 years ago, you could go to the top, any government department, look at the top 5, 6 people there, and ask them, look, prepare a policy paper, one-page policy paper for your minister on this key issue. And they'll be able to sit down and they'll write it. They used to write it in their hands now. They should be able to do that on their computers now. But today, I doubt very much if they can do that. One, they don't even have the good English to do it. Two, they don't have the analytical capacity. Three, they have no inclination to do it. The idea of being a bureaucrat is to sit there in the offices, attend meetings and things, and when work needs to be done, to hire consultants, and others from coming from outside to do it. It's very, very sad, but that is a problem. And it's all to do, of course, with the whole mentality that it's all part of our bad governance practices in the region, bad politicians who have political agendas, rather than in fact national development agendas. And the result of that you can see today in Fiji, what a mess we're in. We're such a glorious country in terms of resources. You compare ourselves to a place like Mauritius, which has been growing for 5-6% for the last 15-20 years. They've doubled their GDP per capita in the last 15 years, and we're just barely above what we were 25 years ago. And the extent of poverty in our country, of course, is much greater than is indicated by the GDP per capita. We might appear to be a middle-level country in the world, but if you look at the extent of poverty, in fact...
One other thing I want to ask you is, as an economist, do you see any link between the fact that Fiji, being a developing country, still doesn't have free primary and secondary education, whereas a lot of developing countries do?
Well, I'd even go a bit further. I mean, in my article, in the book of article, there's one little one about preschools, right? Did some research about 7 years ago, and looking at performances of children after they've been to preschool and comparing them with the performance of children who had not been to preschool, right? And they were so clear, the evidence that if a kid went to preschool, there's huge improvement in the average marks in English and arithmetic and everything else. But interestingly, the improvement was only for the children from the poor families, not for the wealthy families, right? And you can understand why, can't you? A wealthy family already has in their home the books and everything else, educated parents who will talk to the kids and they bring the kids up. In the poor families, whether you are in Batuanga or Rewanga, wherever it is, the family is uneducated, there's no books, nothing. Children have a very bad environment at home. Sending them to preschool brings them on the level playing field and they show the improvement. What does it mean for policy? I told the minister then, I told another minister, I told the minister again, a few weeks ago. I said, it's ridiculous to say that you've got fee-free primary education when in fact parents have to actually pay to get their children into preschool. And what they have to pay to get into preschool, in fact, is so high It's a terribly high actually fees, and most poor families can't afford it. So only the middle class and upper classes send their kids to preschool. You've got to actually make preschools free if you want to make sure that you tackle this relative deprivation of poor children right from the earliest level. So your question is right, but I think it goes right back down to the basic level. And I think you people all were nodding away actually when I said free primary school. You all know it's not really free. By the time they paid building fees and school uniform fees and library fees and this and that, I mean, it's still costing a lot. And really, we ought to have free education. But there is an article there which was written in '97, which is about the costs of military coups. And one of the articles there talks about the huge amounts of money we are wasting on the military. And the more money you spend on the military, of course, the less money there is for education and health. That was 10 years ago. I think the problem is probably even more severe. I mean, Robert, last year there was over expenditure by $40–50 million in the military. This year will probably be the same. And the economy is not growing, so the tax revenues actually are not going to grow, which means that government, to balance the budget, is going to have to make a cut somewhere. Where do they make a cut? The two biggest budgets are education and health. Yeah. So there won't be any salary increases for nurses, which is one of the things I talked about, and there won't be any subsidized salaries for preschool teachers, which is what you really need if you're going to have free preschool.
And there are countries like Costa Rica that do away with their military so that they can spend that money on education, which again is considered a low.
I mean, you ask yourself, why would you want to spend $70 million, right, on 3,000 people to march around, with guns and things, right? Play the band every now and then, and a few of them every 6, 7 years, 10 years, they do a military coup which sets our country back another 10 years. Whereas education, teachers, what they do, nurses, what they do, right? Engineers out there, what they do. What precisely do military people do in terms of productive effort in our country? Right? I mean, that's a problem that's not going to go away. Again, it's a theme that's in there. You could probably write another article on that. Hey, Robert, let's go to all the budget figures and see what the actual expenditure has been, as opposed to what was given to them by Parliament, the year before. Yeah.